Hello, everybody, and welcome to the LeanTossup Call of Duty League podcast. It's that time again, guys. The Call of Duty League is back. Actually, at this point, we are recording this on Wednesday. We are 2 days away from Call of Duty League matches in Black Ops 6. It's been a somewhat long off season. It felt a bit longer than it was, but we had football, so it's okay. But guess what, guys? We're back now. I am joined, as always, by my co-host CDLMetrics. You ready for the new season? How's it going?
I will say this is the first year since 2020 where I haven't purchased the game yet. I fully plan on doing so, but I've had other games to keep me occupied in the meantime. But I've definitely watched my fair share of the pros play so far. We had a preseason tournament already. We had the World Cup, Esports World Cup back in August, so that we've had a lot to tide us over, and we're starting in early December, which is great to see. Excited to talk about the new teams, the new game, the schedule, all of that stuff.
Yeah, the Esports World Cup was actually very good. That was actually pretty exciting. It was a great tournament, not just for Call of Duty, but also for League of Legends and other sports as well. So that was really fun, and some changes happened before then, and then whole lot of changes have happened since that tournament to today. And let's start getting into some of them. So, off-season news. Our last episode was us previewing the Esports World Cup. And, surprise, FaZe won the Esports World Cup. They basically went undefeated in the two group matches, undefeated in quarter. They won it 3-0 in quarters, 3-1 versus Optic in the semifinals. And then they beat 100 Thieves. Not the same 100 Thieves as now. A different 100 Thieves than the team now. But they did win the tournament. The 100 Thieves came in second place, obviously runner-up. Optic and Surge came top 4, and then top 8 was Cloud9, Breach, Ultra, and Ravens. That was the case with that incredibly stacked bracket, where it was very difficult to get out of the bracket on the one side. But yeah, FaZe, Optic was able to win champs. FaZe didn't even get into the finals of champs, and Optic was able to pull out champs, and FaZe got their revenge in the Esports World Cup. So yeah, and then with a nice 16-3 in map count. So yeah, any thoughts on this?
Yeah, no, it was pretty entertaining to watch. We had group play with challengers teams from around the world. We got to see Team Falcons, which is the Saudi-based esports team that showed up on their home turf. They played FaZe, as you can see in their very first match. They did get swept, which wasn't a surprise, but they fought pretty tough. So that was good to see. We saw some other challengers teams upset some pro teams. I'm just remembering off the top of my head. Miami Heretics came in and lost both of their matches, which means they lost to a challengers team somewhere in there. And I believe Minnesota Rocker, who were representing G2 Esports, they also went 0-2, I believe. So we had a few upsets here and there early on. It was a single elimination bracket when we finally made it to the top 8, so that caused for some chaos. But yeah, ultimately Atlanta FaZe dominant win, which is a relief to me because I had taken them to win the last 2 majors, and they fell on their face both times, and I stuck with them in our Esports World Cup preview, and they came through in a big way. So happy to see them end the year on a high note. I think they were deserving of another major win somewhere in there. They only had one last season, and yeah, really poor showing at champs. So to bounce back like this is good to see from them. And they stick with the same roster going into this year, so they should be very competitive once again. But yeah, overall a fun tournament to watch, and we already have news that we're going back next year. We'll see how that shakes out in 2025.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's going to be an interesting... I'm actually excited for this. I hope they do expand the tournament a little bit. Single elimination bracket was a bit underwhelming a bit. If that was a bit of a bigger bracket, maybe it was a double final bracket, that would be cool. I think they were trying to be careful to not make it too much importance on there, but I think a double limb bracket for that would have been cool. But sorry, moving on. So we've had some team changes. Some teams have stayed the same. Obviously, FaZe, and in terms of just team names themselves, FaZe is still the same. Boston is the same. LA Thieves. Optic, I think, is now just... I'm not sure if they're still Optic Texas or just Optic Gaming now. I'm not 100% sure, but that's not really important. Miami Heretics are the same. Toronto is the same. Seattle, as you can see down here in this corner, they are the Vancouver Surge now, not Seattle anymore. They've moved just slightly north. Minnesota Rocker is, I think they're actually still the Minnesota Rocker, but they're part owned by G2 now. So G2 is a part owner in them. Carolina is still the Carolina Royal Ravens, which is a name that makes no sense. But whatever, that's still the same. Vegas, Legion is now the Vegas Falcons. As a person who is Canadian, I am happy that we have taken the fleur-de-lis back, because I have no idea why they had the fleur-de-lis in the first point, and then why the fleur-de-lis was part of the Vegas logo, but whatever. It's now the Vegas Legion, so that's totally fine. New York Subliners are now Cloud9, but for some reason they'd added the New York. I'm not completely sure why they did that, but okay, that's fine. And then LAG is still the Los Angeles Gorillas, but they are now partnered with Gentlemates, so it's the LAGM8 or something. Yeah, what are your thoughts on the changes we've seen?
Yeah, a little surprised. There were some rumors going into this year that the whole city based thing might go up in flames, like how we have Atlanta FaZe, Los Angeles Thieves. Like every team is tied to a city or a state or something. And yeah, just because we were going into the Esports World Cup, a lot of the teams just went by their organization name. Atlanta FaZe were like, I think they were still Atlanta FaZe, but they were also FaZe Clan. Optic Texas were Optic Gaming. LA Thieves won as 100 Thieves. Or I'm sorry, they didn't win, but they had a good showing as 100 Thieves, not LA Thieves. Just based on that, it felt, okay, maybe we're going to ditch these city names. But if teams wanted to keep them, they were more than welcome to. Toronto Ultra was a team that most people thought of as, oh, they should probably stick as Toronto Ultra because they've made good branding. We thought Minnesota might switch over now that they have a new parent organization over them. To see that all the city, state, location-based names are staying for this year is a little bit of a surprise, but it's whatever. The teams are the teams. And yeah, just today, they finally announced that LA Gorillas, Gentlemates merger thingy, whatever that is. So yeah, they're technically like the Los Angeles Gorillas M8 something. I'm just going to call them the Gorillas the whole year. And they do have a new logo that just dropped where it's just the two merged together. I didn't have time to update the slides for that, but it's basically the same thing. Yeah, just some housekeeping things to keep note of. But yeah, for the most part, the teams are sticking the same minus location changes or some branding changes.
Yeah, I will say I was also surprised at the team location staying the same. I fully expected that to be gone after the Esports World Cup, but for some reason it's back, and I don't really. It doesn't matter, right? It fundamentally does not matter for the league whether or not it's the Optic Texas or Optic Gaming. That really doesn't matter at all. But it is concerning that we thought that going into this season we were going to see a lot of changes. There was going to be a lot of things different than last year. One of the things that was going to be was we were going to ditch the city names, city team names, and that stayed. And sorry, a lot of other things have stayed too. And I think that's a little concerning as a CDL fan watching this and seeing, at least on this part, and on many other places too, a bit of a lack of change, as less than we expected. And that's a theme we'll see as we go through with the rest of the stuff here. Moving on with the rosters here, you can see the rosters up here. Phase base. This actually not basically. This is exactly the same roster as last year. Optic also the same roster as last year. That roster has not changed, and basically every other roster has changed. Most notably this one here. Thieves. You now have Ghosty is the only person saying the same. You bought out Envoy and Scrap from Toronto Ultra, and you added Hydra from theoretically the Subliners, but it was actually Cloud9. So this team has now been created, and this team, man, this is a super team here. This is basically this side of this wall here, these three teams. This is your the top three teams in the league. Very clearly, these are by far their top three teams in the league. There's no real question about that. The next one's coming down a bit. Obviously, you've got Ultra here with Beans, Kleenex, Insight, and Joe Deceives. This is cobbling together the pieces from Ultra that were left over with Kleenex and Insight. Beans and Joe DeCease being added to that. Some pieces. It's a two player swap there with Ultra, but obviously Thieves got the better of the. I'm fairly sure they sent some cash to Ultra's way. This one for Heretics is basically the same team, except that Vikul decided to step aside from competing, I think, to focus on his studies, so he's now being replaced with Rencor. Boston, this is, I think, basically the same Boston team that competed in the Esports World Cup. I think with maybe only very minor changes. This Carolina team is also very similar to last year's, except that Clayster retired, so now you have a couple of different pieces in there. Minnesota, I don't know. This is whatever. Seattle, very little changes, but you did add Nasty and Hixie, which is actually a couple changes I like. LAG, kind of whatever. I'm also whatever on this team as well. Cloud9, again, picking up the pieces of subliners, adding Mac and Kremp and Attach as well. Or no, sorry, they had Mac, adding Kremp and Attach. And Vegas Falcons with basically the same team that was the Falcons last year. They just bought the league spot, and this is the same team that was like did some of the stuff at the World Cup, but not a lot. And I think they just kept the same team for now, and I'm not sure if this is going to stay or not, but this is what their current lineup is. What are some of your thoughts on what you're seeing so far? I believe you probably agree with the same assessment that those are the top three teams. Do you see any other teams challenging that? What do you see so far right off the top on the board?
Yeah, totally agree. Those three teams on the left, FaZe, Thieves, Optic, should be the clear-cut top three all year. I would expect that to be the case. If one of those teams was not in the top three, I really would be surprised. I do think there is a team that can hang around in that mix, and it's Toronto Ultra. They've been there in years past. They have two of their core pieces back. They add in two pieces that I think could help. They'll probably take a step back from where they were last year. I believe they were the 2 seed at Champs. They did win Major 1, I think it was. And then after that, so-so performances. But I think Ultra could hang with those other teams pretty well. And outside of that, we have rosters that we expect to be good to qualify for Champs. I think most people point to Seattle being that. They were a solid team last year. They bring back their two best players, I would say, in 04 and Abuza. Miami Heretics are essentially the same team. They qualified for Champs, just switching out one player there. And then, yeah, outside of that, it's a lot of unknowns. A lot of guys who either struggled a little last year or it's a foursome of players that haven't really played together that much at all. I don't know. I look at Minnesota as a team like that where it's like you took like kind of one piece from a bunch of different teams and pieced it together. Yeah, like Ravens, it's like that Slasher TJ combo's there, Gwyn's sticking around. I don't know, I don't really hate any of these teams. The one that's just like I have no clue is Team Falcons, Vegas Falcons, who put up a decent showing at the Esports World Cup, but how does that translate when now all of your games are against CDL competition? We'll see. I suspect they'll have a tough year ahead of them, but overall, the rosters look okay to me. I think it's really hard to sniff out team 5 through 11 this year, and I feel like I said the same thing last year. I really expect like those teams could end up in any sort of combination throughout the year. So it'll be an exciting race again, I think, for the qualification for Champs. Last year it was, I think, the closest we ever had, just going down to that last weekend. There were like 3 or 4 teams that could make it and only 2 spots open. I think we'll have another good competitive race for that last spot or last couple of spots again. We'll see how it all shakes out, but overall, the rosters look good to me.
So, yeah, you made me think of a couple points there. So, I completely agree with that, right? I think, obviously, the top 3, very easy to spot them. I think the next 2, you make some argument of, and I think you probably agree with this, Toronto and Seattle. Or, no, there you go. You got to get used to it already. Toronto and Vancouver, the 2 Canadian teams. I think there's an argument for both of those to be the 4th and 5th team. But outside of that, the other 6, I have no idea which one's better than the other one. Honestly, I have no idea. If you told me pick between the 2 of them, I'd just be like minus 120. I have no idea, honestly, between any of them. And I think when we get to the lines for week 1, I think I'm going to say that again. And then obviously I think you have to pick Vegas to be the lowest, but I think there's certain pieces to that where it's the team did some stuff at the Esports World Cup. Now, yes, it was home court advantage, home field, literally home country, home time zone. But I think if you maybe they could do something, but at the same point in time, if there was a team that was going to make team changes and actually have a good roster, I'd put the ones that are backed by part of the oil cartel. Yeah. But no, that's the point, right? No, I would say that it's a for those six, I have no idea which one of them is better. I have no idea. So I honestly, it's really hard to pick to pick 6 through 11. I have no idea. And yeah, I think the one more point I will make though is that you do make a good point of it was really competitive so many teams were competitive to get to champs. And the thing is, what I will say is if you remember correctly, and I looked back up today, Subliners, which is the fourth ranked team, they had very roughly, double the points of the fifth best team. And I think the problem with that, though, is that I don't think that's actually going to be something similar to that will be replicated this year. But the problem is because what happened was last year, if you remember, a lot of the times the top four, which was Toronto, New York, FaZe, and Optic, they would all make Sunday. So they would all automatically be getting just those many more points per tournament, right? But now because there's only top three, that fourth spot is now suddenly open. And that lets another team try to get in there and get those extra points. So if one team is just ever so slightly better than the other, if one of Toronto and Vancouver is just ever so slightly better than the other one, they're going to have a ton more points. I think that's where this season could get very interesting. Any other thoughts on that, or do you want to move on?
No, let's keep it moving.
All right. This was the preseason tournament. This was the Kaison's showdown. I was actually watching this. This was on at like 2 a.m. or some insane. It was like so early, and it was like it started. It took forever. You go ahead and explain what happened here. I'll let you have this one.
Yeah, so this one I did not actually watch this live. So you beat me to the punch on that. I watched these matches after the fact, and I'm glad I did because it looked like there were a number of technical difficulties that occurred throughout pretty much every match. And I think there's only 6 total matches. This was a 4-team tournament. The teams involved 100 Thieves, Optic, FaZe, and Cloud9. So 4 of the top teams we expect coming into this year. And they just played like a straight up double elimination bracket. It was, I don't want to say it was a fluky tournament because I do think there are things we can take from this, but it was pretty wacky. We didn't play control at all, so the best of 5 series went hardpoint search, hardpoint search. So we played a ton of hardpoint. I think overall throughout the weekend we played 18 hardpoints and 8 searches. No controls. So that's a big asterisk. Obviously, we will be playing control during the CDL season, so we didn't get any data points on that. But nevertheless, 100 Thieves did come out with the win. They did fall down to lower bracket after their second match versus Optic, but rebounded by beating FaZe for a second time and then meeting Optic in the grand final and beating them that time around. So very contested tournament overall. As you can see, LA Thieves were 11-7 in map count. That's not dominant by any stretch. Optic were right there, very easily could have won. The grand final did not go their way. FaZe, I would say, maybe disappointed slightly with the third place finish. I would have probably picked them to finish 1 or 2 in this tournament ahead of time, but not their weekend. And Cloud9, I think finishing 4th made the most sense. We think they'll be like a top 5, top 6 team this year, but not really on par with those other 3. Yeah, overall, it was a tournament that happened. There was one other instance I wanted to mention, which was, I think it was in the round 1 match of Optic and Cloud9. There was a search and destroy where, like in the middle of the game, Pred just disconnects randomly because that was just happening to people. and then it takes them like 20 minutes to fire up the game and figure out what the round count was and everything. And right when they restart, Chance, the caster, mentions like, oh, we have a 2-minute timer on round count, which is not, that should not be the case. It should be a minute 30 for every round of search and destroy. So that was a little fluky. They let it fly. It didn't really matter at the end of the day. But when they returned from that break, Optic, I believe, had just finished an attacking round before the disconnect happened. And then when they came back after the reset, they were the attacking team once again. So they didn't get everything in order. They played an extra round of attack. It didn't end up mattering. But there was just fluky stuff like that happened all weekend. Hopefully the CDL will run a little smoother than that as we start play this weekend. But yeah, I don't know if you had any other thoughts on this tournament, any other takeaways?
I tried to watch a bit of it live, but I was very tired, so I did fall asleep during it. But then I did watch a lot of it on replay on YouTube. I have some of the same conclusions. I think I didn't care so much for results, because obviously, as you point out, no control, no, a lot of fluky stuff happened, lots of technical difficulties, which we hope will be fixed for this weekend. If not, haha, we've got 4 matches each day. I kind of watched it more for pacing and how it looked, how it was playing, and it feels very similar to Modern Warfare 3, which was very similar to Modern Warfare 2. It really feels like just a reskinned Modern Warfare 3. Now, it's obviously not. There is mechanically different things and stuff, but the look of the maps, it feels very similar to Modern Warfare 3. It looks like it, at least. I know it's different, but a lot of these COD games are looking very similar to each other, is my take at this point. But again, that doesn't really impact the competitive season per se. It just impacts the kind of overall look of the maps. Moving on, though, you did some data analysis here, though. Obviously, on the hard point and the searches. Do you want to talk a little bit about what you found here?
Yeah, for sure. So, yeah, very elementary stuff here, but this is something that I find interesting early in the year. Just how are the maps that we have, how are they being played? Are they tight? Are they blowouts? Are they enjoyable to watch? That sort of a thing. I went through every hardpoint game. Again, I think we had 18 or so. Yeah, should be 18 hardpoints throughout that preseason tournament that Thieves won. The average margin of victory on any given map of hardpoint was about 89 points. So that's a lot, especially when you look at years past. Again, small sample versus huge samples. But yeah, you just look at 2024, 2023, go back all the way to Modern Warfare. The typical game of hardpoint ends between 57 and 69 points, something in that bucket of points, which is about one hill worth of points, 60 seconds a hill. They're all in that same bucket. To have 89 points separating that's a big difference. I do expect that's partly small sample. If we played more maps, that number probably would come down. And then just looking at map-specific stuff, we had Skyline, which is a very small map. We saw that played 4 times. That was only a 58-point difference on average in those games, and that makes sense. It's very fast-paced. It's very bocage, I think, is a pretty good comparison for that. I heard the commentators mentioning that as well. So, yeah, those maps that are just crazy fast-paced, you're going to see a lot of back and forth, and the margin of victory should be tight overall. And then it stretches out. We had some maps where you can piece some hills together and win by 100 pretty easily. Yeah, hardpoint, interesting that the margin of victory was that big. I suspect as the year goes on, as the map set maybe fluctuates, that will come down naturally. But I do want to also point out that Cold War was the highest margin of victory for any season we've had so far in hardpoint. And that was a Treyarch game, and we're back on a Treyarch game. And I think that kind of makes sense. I do expect this game as a whole to have big margins of victory relative to what we've seen in years past, just because I think these Treyarch games have a touch more skill level, separating like the great players from the good players from the average players. So if that's the case, right, these great teams, the Phases, the Thieves, all of those teams should be able to put their skill on display more and win by a bigger margin. So I don't think it'll be 89 points all year, but I do think it'll be maybe mid to upper 60s like what we saw with Cold War. So yeah, those are my thoughts with Hardpoint. Search and Destroy, not a ton to take away. Again, we only played it like 8 times, but I just thought this was funny. Every year since 2020, the average margin of victory has been about 2.8 or 2.9 rounds. So the typical game you can think of as 6-3, which makes sense. Yeah, and in this tournament, it was 2.9 rounds. The map set in Search seems fine, but yeah, not a ton to take away there. Any other thoughts from you, Robert, on these numbers?
A couple of things on that. So, one, I will say, this data, I love this data. It's really cool. What I will say though is that when you do look at big number sets like this, it is always important to note that it's pretty obvious, but there's no myth. There may not actually have been a game that was like exactly like last year. There may not have been exactly a game that was a 66 point margin. Maybe there was, I don't know. But remember that some are closer, some are further away, merged together. A lot are around that number. It's really funny how you have that kind of it's within 10 points, right? 65 to 55, 65. They're all pretty much within that band, and that's really cool that they always fall within that. And I think there's different pieces to that which are like maybe more blowouts, maybe more closer, but they balance each other out. Again, Search and Destroy is exactly 2.9 is comical. That's actually hilarious. That like it barely moves. But it's funny because I don't even remember like a 6-3 score line that often. I'm sure it happened. But I think I'm much more familiar like a 6-2 or like a 6-4. But again, when you have enough 6-2s and 6-4s, that balances out to a 6-3, right? So one more thing I will say about this, though, is that it is a little concerning that there is that high an average margin of victory in the hard points here. Now, normally, if you were trying to do a sample size of just hard point games with CDL teams, you'd get a number, right? And that's fine. But remember, this is not a sampling of random CDL teams. This is the top 3 and then probably one of the next best teams, right? So you should theoretically expect that to be lower, but it's not. Now, are we at a point now where teams progress and they get better as the year goes on? They get better at breaking, they get better at holding. So is it possible this was just very early? And to be fair, this was very early. I think this was like what 2 weeks after the game launched, basically. I think. No, this was like a week after the game launched. I think, right? This was like not very long after the game launched that they were doing this. I don't think. It's possible that we've seen improvement now, and obviously there's a learning curve to each game, and the way people think about some things at one point will improve and get better and get better. But it's we'll have to see. We'll have to see if that margin of victory it should theoretically decrease, but again, if you're looking at an 88.7 margin of victory among the top teams, what is that among non-top teams? Is that 100? Are we going to start looking at 100-point blowouts and some of this stuff, right? It's interesting. We'll have to see. And again, Skyline there showing at 58. The other ones, 2 of the other ones are over 100, right? This is something to watch this weekend. Let's see what this looks like this weekend when we see these games this weekend. Keep in mind, margin of victory matters a lot. Maybe not people aren't betting a lot of spreads right now, but later on in the season, people are gonna start betting hardpoint spreads, right? People are gonna start betting kill lines, right? Margin of victory matters in a lot of this stuff, right? So keep that in mind for your prize picks kill spread entry things. Moving on, this is the competitive map set. Now it actually technically will change theoretically tomorrow. Hacienda will be added, as you can see here. And it will be debuted in competitive play during the CDL 2025 minor tournament one on January 10th. This will be coming, but I suspect for the 2 weeks we have now, this will be the competitive map set. And as you can see, a lot of similarities. Protocol, Red Car, Rewind, Skyline, Vault, and then Protocol and Vault are the 2 control maps. That's a little concerning, but I'm fairly sure it'll clean itself up. I have not seen a lot. What are your kind of thoughts on the map set right now, as of now?
Yeah, it seems okay. I'm glad to see that news just dropped on Hacienda because we do need a third control map. If you can remember back in the Vanguard days, we had, at least for the first like half of the season, we had Gavutu and we had Tuscan for control, and that was it, which meant that winning the coin toss to figure out map vetoes was enormous, because if you win the coin toss, then you can elect to be Team B, I want to say, because Team B literally gets to just pick which control map you play. So that is a huge thing, I think, to keep note of for the next 2 weeks at least. We'll have 2 control maps. Whoever wins the coin toss should have a pretty nice advantage. Now, we might get a match where it's like Phaser playing Toronto, and both of them secretly want to play protocol control, so that the coin toss doesn't really matter in that sense because they're both going to pick it. But if there is a match where the teams would vary, like one team really wants to play protocol, one team really wants to play vault, that coin toss is going to matter quite a bit. Some things to keep note of: red card as a search map and a hardpoint map, not great. I suspect Hacienda will just replace it straight up in both game modes. I could be wrong, and maybe we have more maps on the way, but so far it's not a great map set to start for 2 weeks, but the good news is that it's just for 2 weeks. Yeah, we'll see how it shakes out with the new stuff in January.
Yeah, agreed. Some of these are cooler. I think red card is the soccer stadium one. Rewind is it's like an old blockbuster. I know what blockbuster is. I think you know what a blockbuster is. Some of our viewers might not know what that is. Look that up online. But some of them are also pretty cool. Hacienda is a map that I never personally watched live competitive. I've rewatched some old matches with Hacienda in it. It seemed like a great map, so I'm actually excited to see that back for the first time in 5 years. It was 5 years ago in 2019, so we get that one back very soon now. For the year, there have been some changes, and again, as we mentioned before, the more things change, the more they stay the same. There are 4 majors again, not 5. Great. There is online qualifiers again, but now there's minor tournaments. There's a minor tournament for Major 1 and a minor tournament for Major 2, and then theoretically and as of yet unannounced minor tournament for Major 3 and for Major 4. LAN 1 is hosted by Toronto Ultra in Madrid for some reason. I'm not sure exactly why Madrid got a tournament before England, but okay. Optic is hosting in Dallas for Major 2, and then Miami is hosting in Fort Lauderdale in April. And then Major 4, we don't know. It's going to be a LAN tournament. They're not sure what it is, and those are the online qualifiers for that. And then I believe they said something along the lines of Champs in June or July or something like that, and then Esports World Cup in July or August, something like that. The minor tournaments are interesting. Basically, they're single elimination, and they will be a way to get some points and some money, and it'll be a kind of interesting weekend. What are your thoughts on the format? Are you happy with the changes in the format? A bit underwhelmed? What do you think?
Yeah, I'm curious to see how the minor tournaments play out. I like the idea of them. I just think we might get to that weekend and be like, oh yeah, it's the minor. And then it happens and it's like, all right, that's. I just think it'll look very similar to online, or just regular online qualifiers with a little bit more at stake. Yeah, they're single elim. The seeding for them is pretty wonky just because every team will make the minor, I think, if I'm correct.
Yes.
I think all 12 make it. And the seeding is going to be based on the first 4 online qualifiers that every team plays. So Major 1, we're starting this week, and then next week, each team will play twice this weekend, twice next weekend, and then we'll have the seeding for the minor that first week we're back in January. If you go 1-3, you might just be in loser's bracket right away, or however that shakes out. I actually, it would probably be top 4 get a bye, and then the next 8 are all just in round 1. I don't know, maybe losing doesn't really matter. But yeah, it'll be a weird kind of thing, and we'll see how it goes. I suspect, yeah, champs will be in June if Major 4 is in the middle of May, just because I can't imagine the league would want to wait more than a month for champs. So we'll see that, and then, yeah, the Major 4 venue, TBD on that. But it's just weird that Major 1 and Major 2, I'm glad it's 7 qualifiers per team before the major, and I'm glad that the minor tournament won't affect the seeding for the major tournament. It's just CDL points and prize money. But yeah, we get 7 online qualifiers for those, 5 only for Major 3 and Major 4 because we're not playing a minor. So the seeding for those a little flukier, which I'm not a huge fan of as you get closer to champs. I wish it was just 7 online qualifiers for every major, but yeah, I don't know. We'll see how it shakes out at the end of the day. But yeah, a lot of COD, that's for sure.
Yeah, a lot of COD left, and we'll be having this year, so I'm pretty excited for that. All right, so the CDL coaches poll. This is what they had for this year. So I think this is all the CDL coaches. You rank them, etc. That's how it works. So they have Thieves as the number one ranked team, which is different than the bookmakers. We'll get to them in a second. But again, they seem to very much agree with our rankings here. Thieves, FaZe, Optic, Ultra, Cloud9, Surge, and then Heretics, LAG, Rocker, Ravens, and then Breach, and then Falcons down there as well. And then that's on the right hand side. You can see the poll and the finish. Any comments on this quickly? Do you think where do you think that the do you think the coach is there any on placement on here you disagree with or no?
Nothing I disagree with too much. I did want to include there was a note that Easy Mac, who he was the analyst for FaZe, he's on Breaking Point, put together this poll. There was a shocking amount of love for a team that fell in the middle of the table here, that being Miami. The Heretics, they received one of 12 first place votes. And keep in mind, if you're the coach of a team, you cannot vote. Your team is not included in your ranking. You're ranking the other 11 teams. So some coach out there said Miami is the number one team. But not only that, there were 3 top 4 votes for Miami from 3 different coaches. They put them in the top 4. I suspect it was first. Someone put them first, and then the other 2 put them fourth. But that was a surprise, and they land squarely in the middle of the table here, which I think makes sense for them. But yeah, just weird results, a little behind the scenes from Easy Mac. So yeah, maybe a team to keep your eye on. And then I just a couple things I thought were funny, like yeah, Vegas Falcons. They're lumped in the D tier with Boston Breach. But keep in mind that they received 11 points, which means that every other coach in the league put them dead last. So really, it's nice that Falcons are lumped into the D tier, but they probably should be on a tier of their own at the back. Like Breach should maybe be in their own tier or be included with the Rocker Ravens tier. But yeah, and then just one other thing to mention. I included on the right side just last year's poll of that team and then where they finished in like champ seeding. And a lot of the stuff is pretty accurate. Like you look at the top of the table, it was spot on. Like FaZe first, they finished first. Ultra second, they finished second. And then as you get to that middle section, like LA Thieves were viewed as a very good team going into last year. And they struggled out the gate. They rebounded and finished 7th in seeding. A big whiff on LA Gorillas. They were in a tier of their own in 12th. And they finished 6th thanks to some good major placements. And they got in somehow. Some big whiffs here and there. Rocker were viewed as a middling team, and they were almost last place. Boston Breach were included with a number of teams and were clearly the worst team all year. The poll is, I think, a good indicator of where these teams are right now, specifically in hardpoint, because these teams are mostly just playing hardpoint against each other right now. A little bit of control and a little bit of search, but don't take this as the end-all, be-all. Yeah, things will move. We'll look back on this a year from now and be like, wow, they really messed up putting Royal Ravens at 10th because they actually finished 5th or something random like that. But I don't know. Any other thoughts on this?
I will say, and we'll talk about this. Actually, I'll save my thoughts for the next slide because I know what the next slide is. Futures preview. This is what we have for basically the CDL, the breaking ratings, or sorry, odds to win it all as per Bet365. Obviously, a very similar format to the coaches poll, but some key differences though. They have Optic as the number one favorite to win it all. I know why. I think we all know why, because that's how bookmakers have to. You have to do that. You have to pay the Optic price. But then they have FaZe and Thieves as the 2 runners up, but again, very close. 50 basis points, not a lot there. And then they have a much lower tier, right? They have Ultra, they have Cloud9, they have Gorillas tied there, they have Ravens, they have Surge, then Rocker, then Breach, then Heretics, and then Falcons as the coaches do. They have them as basically a tier of their own all the way down there. Um, my take on this is that I think Surge is a little too. I think they're a little too low, actually. I think there's a very strong argument for them to be at least as good as Cloud9, let alone maybe. I think they're probably better than Toronto Ultra, actually, in my opinion. Um, but I don't know. That's my only real take about this. I'm surprised at the lack of faith in Seattle. I think they're better than people think they are, and I think they deserve to be up there with Ultra and Cloud9 a lot closer to it. Again, they're not necessarily far from them, but they're not close to them either. What are your thoughts on that? Do you see a clear difference between Ultra, Cloud9, and Surge? Do you see it like the books and the coaches do, or do you think Surge is closer up there as well?
Yeah, I think Ultra is justified where they are, like squarely in fourth. Although they are, I do disagree with their odds compared to the teams next to them. I would actually throw Ultra a little closer to the top three. If we were setting if you're just looking at one of the columns, let's look at, I guess, to win champs on the far right. FaZe, Optic, Thieves are all hovering around plus 200 to win champs, which kind of makes sense because we think it's going to be one of those three. Ultra's at 14 to 1. That is, that's pretty close to Cloud9. They're at 16 to 1. Gorilla's 16 to 1. I would probably, if I was setting the odds, put Ultra closer to 8 to 1, maybe 10 to 1. I think 14 is a little too long. I think Ultra might find themselves in a tier of their own. I have a lot of confidence that they won't be 7th or 8th. They will be squarely in the champs conversation, and I think in that conversation of they could win if they get hot at the right time. Everything else, there are some interesting nuggets now when you just compare like the coaches poll to what we have on the board here. Surge do feel maybe a little low just compared to, Cloud9 and Gorillas. You can't tell me that Gorillas at minus 700 to make champs is as good of a bet as like Surge is at minus 138. That seems a bit drastic if you're asking me. And then, Heretics maybe not getting a lot of respect. They made champs last year. Their roster is much the same, maybe even a little better going into this year. They picked up another substitute player, so they have options for lineup construction and that sort of thing. So if you're looking way down the board, I think Heretics makes some sense maybe to qualify for champs. Making the champs final and winning the whole thing is another story. But I think there's value to be had in pretty much any category, wherever you want to look. So,
Yeah, I think I agree with most of that. Moving on. Last year, as many of our viewers will know, we had the race to, what was it?
1580.
1580, yes. Which was a completely random number that was based on we figured out exactly how many CDL points there were going to be in the air, halved it, figured it out. However, this year we're going to do it a little bit different. And I'll let you explain it in a second, but I'll explain a couple of reasons why it's different. First, though, one is we actually don't know how many CDL points there are going to be. Because if they add majors and if they add more minors and stuff, we actually have no idea how many points there will be. And two, it's also going to be, as when we were talking about this before we recorded this, basically because there is a top three, a very clear top three, whoever, assuming we did snake draft, or if we just did 1-2-1-2, whoever got two of the top three would be instantly favored by a mile, right? So I think this is a better way to compensate for it. So I'll let you go ahead and explain what you've built here.
Explained. I think most people will pick up why we're doing it like this. Last year it made more sense because there was like a top 2 and a top 4, so you were going to get a pair of those teams. With this year, it looks like there's a top 3, so we got to switch it up a little bit. So if anyone is familiar with daily fantasy sports, DFS, or honestly, I've just seen videos like this, just like scrolling social media, where it's, all right, you've got $10, make your perfect Super Bowl buffet of pizza's $5, wings are $4, beer is $3, blah, 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 down the list. Make your perfect menu of things. This is essentially the same thing. What I did was I gave every CDL team a price, and the price is based on a couple of things. Just historical data on how teams have finished in years past in terms of how much of the total CDL points share those teams have. So the first place team typically gets about 14 to 15% of all of the CDL points that are accrued throughout the year. And then I looked at this year's futures market and said, okay, who is the first place team? And I gave that to FaZe. You could make an argument maybe Thieves deserve to have that, or Optic. But I said, okay, FaZe are the favorites to win the regular season. To me, that seems to indicate the best team would be the 1 seed, even though Optic technically have better odds to win champs for some reason. So I gave FaZe that number 1 slot, and I made them $14. And then down the list we go, all the way down to Vegas Falcons, who I gave a $3 value to. What we have is a full menu of CDL teams, and I gave everyone a $34 budget. You can pick as many CDL teams as you want, and as long as you stay within that $34 constraint, it works. So yeah, anyone listening, if you're following me on Twitter or X, you can go to my pinned post and follow the Google form, fill out a lineup however you feel, make sure it's under $34. And yeah, if you submit an entry before the games kick off this Friday, you will be entered into a CDL Team Pack giveaway that I'm doing. Feel free to play along with us. I think the next slide has the teams that we both picked out for this contest. We went in a couple different directions, but yeah, we could maybe go through that and just talk about why we picked the teams we did.
Yeah, if you want to go first, then I'll say how I picked. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, my first pick, I did go with the dominant, expensive piece that is Atlanta FaZe. And I was actually a little surprised that you picked them as well, but I just took them because they've always been first place. They've always led the league in CDL points. They have the same team they did last year. Yes, Optic and Thieves could challenge them for the number 1 seed, but at the end of the day, I'm just going to take the best, who I view as the best team in the game. Maybe they're dethroned this year, but I'm good with sticking with them. So I went with FaZe. I also included Ultra. Like I said before, I think their prices are maybe a little too close to the middle of the pack. I do think they should be a little bit closer to that top 3. I don't think they belong with those top 3 yet. Maybe they'll prove me wrong in a couple weeks, but yeah, I just think for $10, like, I could fit them in pretty easily. And I didn't really want to do the 2 in the top 3 thing just because I was worried about having some leftover cash. So FaZe, Ultra, and then I had $10 extra to spare. So it was either take a $7 team and Falcons or take the 2 $5 teams. So I took the 2 $5 teams. I'm more bullish on Heretics than I am Breach, just based on like that coaches poll and how I view both of those organizations. So yeah, I squeezed both of those teams in. So I've got FaZe, Ultra, Breach, and Heretics.
Yeah. No, it's good. I like your lineup. I'll go through why I picked mine. So I picked FaZe as well. I was actually going. It was a debate for me. I was trying to think of a couple different ways to optimize this. The first look was like Thieves Optic. I was debating between Thieves Optic or FaZe Thieves. Basically, just debating between Optic or FaZe. And I think the thing with it is that FaZe has been the most consistent team in the CDL for what? I think they've basically won the points standings in the CDL every year in its entire
Every year.
existence.
Yep.
Yeah, and it's basically the same team right now. All right, maybe something happens this year. Maybe Optic dethrones them, or maybe Thieves dethrone them, whatever. But I felt like it was a very known quantity. I was thinking heavily about Optic, but at the same time, Optic looked pretty good last year. But every once in a while, and we've seen this a lot of times with Optic, they get bored. They get bored. They have a bad major, a bad couple weeks. That can cost you in a points race like this. I think paying the extra dollar for the consistency is up there. I went with Thieves instead of Ultra. I think I think the top 2 teams in the league are FaZe and Thieves. And I think Optic is somewhere close to there, but I think Thieves is the best team in the league. I think that if given enough time, I don't think you can match the raw firepower of Scrap and Hydra. I think those are 2 of the best players in the league. I think that while they've been on different teams and that the rest of their core has been good, I think if you put basically 2 of the best players, the best AR and the best SMG on the same team, I think watch out. I think overall, I think when FaZe would play subliners or Ultra, I think that the average player on I think basically that your average FaZe player was better than the rest of your Ultra or Subliners player, but I think their top was better than their top, and now you have 2 of those tops, and I think that there should be a bigger gap there, in my opinion at least. But also, Thieves, Hydra, and Scrap have been those are Those players, they play in the regular season. We've not really had bad weeks. A couple times with subliners, very rare with Ultra, but those are teams that are very dominant and very consistent as well through the regular season as well. In terms of Ultra, and I guess we'll talk about Ultra now. I I don't believe in this team. And I say that as an Ultra fan. I will. Obviously, I'm still going to support Ultra, but I think I will support Thieves because it has a lot of the players that I do like on there, Scrap and Hydra. So I'll be a side Thieves fan for this year. But the thing with Ultra is this: is that we've talked about this team in the past couple of years, and we've said, okay, this team is underperforming, or there's a problem with this team. The people we look at and we point the finger to are usually Insight for not having and not playing high paced enough, and Kleenex sometimes for having massive underperformances in games. Sometimes he'll have a really good game, completely dominant 30 kill game, and sometimes he'll go like 15 and 30 in a game, right? And I think that you put that in there and you take away the consistency pieces of Scrap and Envoy, and I think you get a little bit worried there. I get a little worried about that team. While Ultra can be good, I have seen enough bad Insight and enough bad Kleenex that I'm a bit off of that team. That being said, I actually really do Surge. I think they are undervalued. I think 04 and Abuza is very good. Hixie was also very good when he was in the league before. He was one of the best players. He sat all year in Challengers, which is unfortunate for him, but he's back now. Nasty was also a very good player on the original London Royal Ravens, and he's come in a couple of times as well. So I actually really do like that Surge team, and when you go 14 and 12, you do have enough space there. You have an $8 space, but there's no $8 teams, and I do that Surge. I'm very sad. I wanted to try to pencil in Falcons, but I unfortunately was not able to. I was $2 short to pencil in Falcons, but I didn't want to give up Thieves or FaZe, so I unfortunately could not add for Falcons, though. But I will say that the deliberate strategy of getting two of the top three was important, because when you look at last year, and basically when we did the race to 1580 last year, and I thought back to that, basically the result was almost entirely decided. Obviously, I was able to come back in the top two teams we picked, the two and two we picked. The end result was almost completely decided by that. If it hadn't have been for your back half massively underperforming my back half, you would have won because you just simply picked FaZe. And I remembered that, I took that to heart, and that's why I did the strategy with Thieves and FaZe. We'll see if it pays off. Maybe you found some value in Ultra, and again, Breach and Heretics will get points. 100% they will get points. But I feel like in this game, if you're able to identify the fourth team, which is I think both what we're trying to do, we're both trying to pick that fourth team. You're picking Ultra, I'm picking Surge. If we're able to pick that fourth team, then all of a sudden I think this becomes a blowout. Is what I think, and it's again that's a good strategy to have. We're both trying to find the same thing there. And I think that's the strategy, and we're both going about different ways, which is interesting. That's called debate, so that's good. But yeah, I'm actually excited to see how this is going to turn out. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, no, I agree. I like your strategy of getting the two of the top three. I was debating doing that as well. I did want to change it up just for the sake of let's see how this goes thing. But I have a few entries that have already come in for the contest, and I did see someone build a 5-team lineup, which I thought was pretty interesting, where I believe they punted all top 3 options and then just took 5 in the middle and toward the bottom. So that could work, though, right? If we get a season where there is way more parity than we expect, even having the worst team might not be a bad thing because they might accrue 80 points throughout the year, and that might be awesome. I don't think that'll happen this year. I do think Vegas Falcons are actually, like, dare I say, overpriced at $3. I really just think... Do you remember the Vanguard? I think it was Vanguard year. Paris Legion, they won 2 games all year. And I'm not saying that, like, Vegas is only going to win twice this year, but I just think it's going to be a tough year where there's maybe going to win games against Breach or Rocker or Ravens or whoever. Maybe they can scratch out a couple of those. I just think they have no shot against the top 3 at all. And even that, what you're saying with Surge and Ultra, like that tier, even that seems like a stretch. Interested to see, though, there are some teams that have picked Falcons just for that extra team. And if they can piece together 50, 60, 70 points for you somehow, then that looks like a good pick. So yeah, I'm just excited to see how all of these play out and which teams end up being the highest value teams on the board.
Yeah, I think we'll be revisiting this and we'll see this. I will also say shout out to that person who made that one. Again, if you're entering in as like a free contest, having the long shot of what if these five teams are like good, or if one of them is a surprise. The thing is, again, a lot of people, I think their thought on process on this was like a lot of people are gonna pick the same. They're gonna pick the same lineup. They're gonna do two of the top three and then another team, something like that. So I think there's actually there might in that case in a contest in which that's what people are picking. I think there is some value on okay, let's just pick something completely different, right? Moving on, models versus markets. This is what we're gonna call the format where we basically have we do the picks from our models and stuff like that. No model picks for this week, obviously, but this is for the season preview though. For the LeanTossup model, I didn't pick anything. CDLMetrics though has heretics to qualify for champs. I actually don't hate that as well. And then you're doing the double hedge there. You're going phase and thieves to win champs. I actually really do like thieves to win champs. I really like that number. Phase also a good number too, but I think that the thieves one is a bit mispriced. I would probably do the Thieves to win champs and maybe a Seattle at minus 138 to qualify for champs. That seems a little low for a team that's actually pretty half decent. And that's probably about it for me for this. Again, it's very early in the season. No one should be salivating over the ability to bet plus 225 and have it sit there for 6 months. That's not how betting works. I'm not, man, oh man, I can't wait to tie up a 2 unit play on someone to win champs and then I'll cash out maybe in June. Not really worried about that too much. And again, at that price, assuming that they're all pretty much equal, what is it, even if Thieves win, okay, if one team wins all four majors, okay, maybe they're maybe plus 150, but okay, is that really that different than plus 225? So and if another team wins a major or two, then you're basically back to square one, right? And then that's that. Next pod. So this was our preview one. We're also going to do a week one preview, and that will be available on Thursday as well. This will be dropping at about the same time. Thank you everybody for joining us. This was our season preview, and we will see you in the week one preview in a second. Thank you everybody.